Hello and welcome to the best of Sutton Impact Family Style. I'm Jason, and joining us for a second time or third time, cousin Kaley.
I think just second.
Just second, okay.
Hi. I
And
talked over when you introduced me, but hi, I'm cousin Kaley.
yes, and we are doing our best of 2021 plus some other interesting things, including she is going to talk about F1, which we never speak of, and in time to sell us all on it as to why we should watch or be invested in it. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, first of all, I have to establish, do you ever watch F1?
I know nothing about it. I don't even think I played an F1 video game.
Okay, and what about NASCAR?
I'm not a cat, so things rolling around in a circle on a screen don't do much for me.
I love that. Okay, so I feel like, first of all, I will say that I have kind of disdain for NASCAR, and I feel the same. Like, I don't think, besides like Mario Kart, I don't think I have invested in any sort of game that's like truly a racing game. Um, and I feel like I'm like a fair weather sports fan. Like, I really like Marquette basketball. That's where I am an alumni, and I really like Vikings football and Gopher football because my dad played there. But like, I don't really keep track of sports that much. I just, when they're on, I like to get into it, and I really like the Olympics. But like, I'm not a huge sports fan. So I think that's like the context that we're going into this me selling you on F1
Okay.
with. So okay, so this is why I love it. First of all, the way that I was introduced to it is through the Netflix show F1 Drive to Survive, which I think is an excellent show. My husband's friends came and talked to us about the show. They visited us in LA, and like they, were raving about how interesting it was, and I was like, no, I don't want to watch it. I don't care about F1 at all. Like, you can't sell me on this. But they talked about it for like an hour, and which I promise I won't do a full hour. But I finally like gave it a shot. So I think it's really interesting because this is the first sport that I've gotten into because of like a Netflix show or a docuseries. I think that's very unusual.
I think
But I
so.
also think that F1 is like an incredibly approachable sport. So what's interesting to me about it is that there's only 10 teams, and there's only 20 cars throughout the entire season.
Okay.
And each team has two cars. So I think that's really accessible, and that it's not like hundreds of teams and hundreds of players and different divisions and all of this. Like, it just feels more contained in a way that I like. That's easier
Manageable.
to kind of like grab hold of.
Agreed.
And I think that it's very, like, I came in assuming that it was going to be like NASCAR. And I guess like in terms of driving around in a circle and like trying to win the race, it is like NASCAR, but it's culturally very different. Like, it's all billionaires and Europeans and incredibly attractive young European drivers, and
Okay.
they basically like move throughout the world at all of these interesting locations. Like, so they're in like Sao Paulo, and then they're in Singapore, and then they're in Monaco, and it's very world adventurous, and I really like that about it.
I get that. That makes more sense. Yes. And I
Yeah.
do like the 10, 20 drivers total, 10 teams total. That seems like a very manageable pay attention to.
Exactly. And the other interesting thing about it is that it kind of like escalates through the weekend. So Friday is a practice round, then Saturday is like qualifying, when they kind of like they like race the lap, see who gets to be the fastest person, and then that determines the position that they start in terms of like the starting grid. And then Sunday is the race, and then it's over. So it's like, I don't know. I just think it's very like manageable in that regard. And then what's particularly interesting about the fact that there's two cars for every team is that they are like fiercely competitive with one another, to the point that they will completely sabotage the chances of their team to beat their main teammate. Like, you're on a team with someone, but you're also trying to win against them and trying to like get past them. And to like actually run into them if they're in your way. And like if you run into them, it's very likely that you both will wreck your cars, and then your team will get no points whatsoever. And that's like very compelling to me.
I can see that. How long is a race? If I sat down on a Sunday to watch a race, how long am I sitting there for?
I think it's like 90 minutes. But to be honest, I really like the show way more than I like the races, and I haven't really watched end to end that many races yet, so I can't say that I'm like a hugely dedicated fan yet, but the few that I've tuned into have been fun, and that like you can kind of second screen while you're watching, and then similar to like a soccer where the like European sportscasters are like really fun in terms of like getting super amped when something fun is going to happen. They do that so then you can kind of tune in, and then you're like, oh my gosh, this actually was pretty dramatic and crazy. And because of the Netflix show, I have these like established relationships with these racers, and so I'm like, oh man, I can't believe that Daniel Ricciardo actually got past his old teammates at Red Bull, and like, oh shit, this is pretty intense. Like that kind of thing, which I think is interesting because it's almost like human interest connection to the team players before love of the sport, which is also kind of like an unusual way to get into a sport, I think.
But it makes sense. I mean, I know that's what they're trying to do with some of the esports shows and some of the other shows out. You know, they try to like UFC and WWE does they're tough enough to try and be like, meet these people, like these people, and then continue to watch them. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think there's something to the fact that like the season culminates in a easy to understand way too. Like for instance, like my husband Michael, he really likes the PGA, and I find the PGA to be not that comprehensible in terms of like when the season starts and ends, and like what they're actually like going for, because the Masters is obviously important to win, but then like there's other things that are important to win, and then the Masters, even if you win the Masters, doesn't mean you're going to win the PGA Championship, and like that kind of doesn't make sense to me. The season doesn't like culminate in a way that makes sense in my mind.
Oh, I get that. Yeah.
F1 does.
Okay, I can see that.
Okay, I feel like I've really tried to sell you on this hard. What do you think?
I think I'm going to try the Netflix show because I feel like that might be a way that I can. That might be it's simple to click on the Netflix, pop that on, and see if that works. I think that's maybe the best method, and then I'll see if I want to watch a race. I have heard a lot more about it. Like it's definitely growing. Like there's some other sports podcasts. I usually skip through the F1 part, but it sounds like it's getting a bigger and bigger chunk of everybody's episode.
I think so, and I think the Netflix is the cause of that. I mean, I think it's wildly successful, and even in the first season, like the top racers aren't in it. Like Lewis Hamilton is not in it, and then by season 2, you kind of get the sense that he's like, oh, this is actually like a legit show, and this is actually bringing like some legit recognition to the sport, and then he's like in it for season 2.
Nice. All right. Well, before we oh yeah.
It is still just going in a circle. So I understand if you don't think it's interesting.
I think I need to at least watch it once after I watch the Netflix
Yeah, you might as well.
Yeah. Well,
I also think like you should try to watch it with your significant other to see if like she feels like it's accessible to her, because I think it's very unusual in like a relationship that you're entering a sport at the same level. Like Michael knows so much more about sports than I do, and so the only
thing. Well, I think we may have lost her for a second. Sounds like the phone cut out. Let's see what we can do. I'll just continue to talk for a second because I don't want to stop everything. And let's see how this goes. So I will try F1, and we're going to call her back live on the air. Oh. I will do my Steeler minute. The Steelers once again won today, and it was fantastic. And Kaley's back with us. I was doing my Steeler minute, where the Steelers somehow, they won. Again, they did terrible for 3 quarters, and somehow they won in the 4th quarter. And
amazing.
It's, as I've mentioned before on the show weekly, it's a very odd relationship, because I feel like the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger have been like the typical parents waiting for the kids to get out of school before they get divorced. So it's not going to end well. It's definitely just going to end. But the sports fan in me is still compelled to watch every week. 'Cause it's like, and they keep winning these games, and you still have Fitzpatrick and Watt and some other guys, and they pull me back in every time. Although, like I said, it's a weird situation because I don't think they can win it all. Speaking of accumulating in a satisfying way, and if you're the Steelers, like winning one playoff game or getting into the playoffs isn't really exciting. We're not the Jets, so I don't know. But the one thing before we get to our best of list, I had two things to ask you about.
Okay, I'm ready.
The first is because I heard Andy Greenwald and some other older music critics talking about this topic I think has come up for like the last 20 years, but just the death of the album in general. Mm-hmm. That now everything is literally just piecemeal. Like you're just getting, you're at the buffet of songs, and it's like an album. Like when's the last time you thought like an album track 1 to track 12 and you listen to it all the time and it's fantastic? Do you have that still? 'Cause you're younger than I am too, so.
Yes, I do have that for, I feel like there's been 3. So one was Fiona Apple's Fetch the Bolt Cutters, and the only reason I listened and invested in that time was that Pitchfork gave it 5 stars, which is like incredibly rare, and I saw, some Twitter conversation that like that was unprecedented. So I felt like, oh, this is worth listening to. And so I listened to that. And then I think Olivia Rodrigo's, I did the same thing because there was so much buzz around it. And then the third one I think is Adele. And I think the Adele one is interesting because she, I think, made a deal with Spotify basically saying, I'll only release on your platform if you toggle off and change the auto shuffle for my album, because as an artist I put a lot of work into thinking about like the sequencing of these songs, and it ruins my process to have you auto shuffle. So I did listen to Adele's front to back, and I think that stance is interesting, and I actually think that stance might like change things. So we'll see what happens. But for the most part, I listen to individual singles, and I do not listen to albums.
Yeah, I think like you, like I have 3 or 4 that pop up every couple of years that they're in my older albums are in my rotation. But yeah, it's not a steady. But I think that Adele thing is awesome that she's taking that stand, and obviously she's got enough juice that she can say, "Hey, this is how it's going to be if you want my album."
Yeah, I feel like there's so few people like her. Like, I think Taylor Swift did the same thing, Spotify, something similar, and Adele, and there's like 5 other people that can be like, that have enough leverage to actually make a gigantic tech platform like Spotify change their ways, and I'm glad that she did that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I was just thinking about sort of the way the album has sort of gone away, and now we've had consecutive films. One I have some thoughts on. We have the old heads once again talking about they're blaming everybody but their movie for why it's performing poorly at the box office. Obviously West Side Story has done quite poorly, and then Ridley Scott's Matt Damon, The Last Duel. But that movie, I feel very strongly. I enjoy Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And if you were doing a movie in Boston anytime from 1950 to now, put them in that movie. Neither of those people have any business being in any sort of historical drama, let alone where you have to do accent work. Their accents are atrocious.
I agree. And I think like the 2 that I've heard the most about like failing were West Side Story, and then also Lin-Manuel Miranda's what's the one In the Heights.
In the Heights, which
I watched and I enjoyed, but I feel like both of those people are missing. The most obvious thing is that musicals don't perform well at the box office because musicals aren't liked that much by the general public. So I don't know. I think I put those in a different category than The Last Duel, and I fully agree with you about The Last Duel. Like, why? It just doesn't make sense that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were in that movie together in those roles.
And again, a movie like The Martian, which I thought was fantastic, like, there's very few actors on this planet that you could have basically in a movie by themselves for 90% of the movie and pull it off. And Matt Damon is one of those. Like, he's got enough charm and charisma. You look at, obviously Goodwill Hunting and, The Town and anything else that Ben Affleck does along those lines. And I've enjoyed his adaptations of some novels too. I think he's done a good job as a director. And I can't imagine like he's the perfect Gone Girl husband. I mean,
Totally. Killed it.
but he's just, if you can't do the accent, like Orlando Bloom looks weird in a modern day movie, but he's
Yeah.
great in period pieces. I don't know why. He's, if it's a fantasy film where he's an elf or it's a period piece, he fits in flawlessly. But in a modern day setting, I don't find him all that compelling. But I just feel like you can't put Affleck and Damon because every time they've been in historical stuff, it's pretty much flopped. And maybe there's
Yeah,
something to
I
that.
think that's a good point. Like, I think you do kind of, even if they're not pigeonholed into a genre, they're like pigeonholed into like sort of a time era, and I think that is very true. Like, I just don't buy them as whatever period that they were in.
No, but it also goes back to one thing I've talked about a lot. Like, I think Daniel Day Lewis is a fantastic actor. But I think one of the things that helped Daniel Day Lewis out is that he would do a movie and go away for a year, and he wasn't doing Jimmy Kimmel. He wasn't in the tabloids. He wasn't on the front page of whatever, Yahoo, whatever news site you go to. I don't know who he's married to. I don't know who he's dating. So I feel like it allowed me to, every time he came back, to just enjoy the performance. Like he didn't bring all this baggage with him every time he came onto the screen. And I know that a lot of people love the superstar, but I think if you're an actor, when you're in the spotlight that much, I think it takes away from your ability to really play a part.
I agree, but I don't know that Matt Damon has that problem. I don't know. I mean, I think Ben Affleck has that problem.
I suppose that's true, yeah.
But I don't know. To me, the last duel for me right now in COVID, I think I've only seen one or two movies back in the theater, and I've watched a ton of HBO Max and like big things released on streaming, and the things that I wanted to go see in the theater were because I couldn't access them at home, or because they were giving me a unique experience, I guess, that
Yeah.
I couldn't get at home. And like The Last Duel is not really giving me either of those things. So I think that also, it's one of those movies where I'm like, yeah, I'll catch it when it's on a streaming platform. But right now, you have to be like a Marvel movie or something like hugely unique or interesting or inaccessible. Like I saw Zola in the theater because it was an A24 movie and I really wanted to see it and it was interesting, and I couldn't watch it at home. But yeah, I mean, most movies, it feels like, oh, it's going to come to streaming sooner or later, so I might as well wait.
Yeah, and now that, you can get a really incredible 60-inch 4K TV for a pretty reasonable price and a sound bar and comfortable chairs, like almost everybody can sort of create, once only rich people could have home theaters, whereas now almost everybody has one.
Yeah.
And again,
Like,
not
I
that there's,
watched Dune at home, and I thought Dune was incredibly beautiful and cinematic, and my experience, I don't think, was that dampened in enjoying, like, the beautiful cinematography because I was at home.
no, and the communal experience of a comedy is obviously something that you can't really get at home unless you have like 10 friends over, but
Yeah. But they're, like, hardly making comedies anyways anymore.
it's true. Well, this seems like a lovely
So,
transition.
speaking of Daniel Day-Lewis, did you read the Jeremy Strong New Yorker article?
I did
Okay.
not.
What did you think about it?
Oh, I know, I skipped that one, sorry.
Oh, you skipped it. You skipped
Yeah.
it. I think it was very fascinating, and I think you should read it.
Okay.
Because he basically has followed Daniel Day-Lewis around. So this is Jeremy Strong from Succession. He's followed and like idolized Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, and Daniel Day-Lewis throughout his entire career, and like really strived to be as method and as intense as them. And it's just an incredibly wild and delightful profile of like a true actor, and I think people on the interwebs like were kind of making fun of it, but that's kind of what I want in an actor. I want like some wild behavior and some interesting, I don't know,
It depends.
eccentricities and stuff.
I also saw a conversation with, oh my God, I'm flicking everybody's name now. Charles Dance and Patrick, who's the guy everybody loves? He was in Star Trek.
LeVar Burton. I don't know.
No, the British actor,
Oh,
the
Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart, and
Yeah,
Charles Dance was making fun of method actors. He's like,
yeah.
because he's basically like, he's like, it's called acting. He's like, that's why when they
Well,
call
that
action,
yeah.
we act.
I feel like that's the very British thing. Like Olivier or Laurence Olivier was like, "Have you heard of acting, my dear boy?" Like it's a very it's a very British thing to look down on American method actors. I think that's
I
very much the case.
I will say, and I'll break out my SAG card and my MFA, and some of the study of Stanislavski and Meisner and Uga Hagen and all the great acting teachers. I will say that, while I'm, not a very good actor, although I've had mild success here and there, that if you study the craft and you work on your craft, it is something you can pull up that emotion within seconds of going from calling action. You don't have to walk around and be a sad sack on set all the time or be a jerk. Like, that's not really
Yeah,
method. Like, that's you changing who you are as a person. That's not actually acting. But I mean, it's,
yeah. I feel like there's maybe some distinction to be made between like doing pre-acting research where you like try to go experience and put yourself in someone's shoes versus like I have to be in this miserable, sad state for 2 days while we film this scene while I cry. Which that second part is like makes your workplace hell for everyone else. Whereas the first part feels like just a part of doing a good job as a professional.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on this before we move on to our best movies of 2021 is that, like I said, I mean, I've been in some acting classes with some incredible people, and they can be laughing and joking. They take a second, they pull up whatever memory they need, whatever they need to pull up into that emotion, and they're right there. And they can cry, they can do all that stuff because they're trained actors. And I think, I think there's a glamorization of the method part that, some people have
Mm-hmm.
glommed onto.
I totally agree. It's more impressive to do that almost.
Well, I guess we can start because I mean it did make my list, but more as like a precursor to what is to come would be Dune, for movies this year that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
But Dune really felt like an appetizer. It felt like this is the world, these are the characters, this is what's happening. But I don't feel like we really got much of a story or much of a movie. We sort of like set the table, so it's kind of hard to judge that as it's clearly like one of three. It's not a film on its own, I would say.
Yeah, or one of 10. I think there's like 10 books,
Oh,
which is a lot. But I totally agree with you. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was sort of difficult. Like, I didn't totally understand what was happening all of the time. And I didn't think that the pacing was that good. I was, like, unsure whether we were telling a beginning to end story or whether we were, like, just doing setup. I guess maybe that was my own ignorance coming into the movie, but I did think that the acting was beautiful, the people were beautiful, and the cinematography was like unparalleledly beautiful.
it was quite nice. Yes. I, I also say before I get on the rest of my list, like I saw a lot of films this year that I thought were, incredibly well done, but I don't know that I'd ever go. Like I watched The Green Knight, an A24 film, and I was super excited for it. And again, it's incredibly well acted, beautifully shot. I mean, incredible sound, like everything, costume, sound design, like everything you'd want in a professional movie. But I wouldn't recommend that film to a lot of people because it's not super satisfying overall as a story. And I don't know if it's a movie I'd ever sit down and watch again. So,
Yeah.
despite appreciating how good it was, I can't say that I'd be like, oh, I can't, I'm not raving at people I rant, but like, hey, Kaley, go watch Green Knight. It's so good.
Yeah. I probably won't go watch Green Knight, even though I really like Dev Patel.
I love him, and then I've said before on this show that my favorite writer, director, and actor of the time is A24.
Well, I mean, that's the movie that I was just talking about, Zola.
Yeah,
I'm like almost 100% sure that it's called Zola, but now I'm having doubts.
I think it is
But it's
called
the one.
Zola. Yeah,
Did you see it?
I've seen the trailer. It's in some list of one of my streaming services. I list that, so it's watched
Yeah.
later. I just don't know which one.
I thought it was excellent, and I think it's interesting because it was based on a Twitter thread from like I don't know 10 years ago, and so I think it's the first movie that's ever been produced from a Twitter thread, and that to me is kind of interesting. And I thought the acting was really good in it.
It's very good. And oddly, I think the only other movie I have on my list is the Fear Street trilogy from Netflix. which I
I
thought
don't even know
was.
what that is.
They made a horror trilogy that's from, I think it's like 2003, 1993, or no, 1973, 1993, 1973, and 1883. So it's sort of the same characters are involved in this witch curse. But it's like a really fun, supernatural horror teen fun movie, I guess is what I would say, trilogy.
And
Everybody in
how
it, it's
scary
really
is it?
good. Not very.
Okay.
I mean, it's a
Did you
witch's
try it?
curse, so, But like I
Yeah.
said, everybody does a really good job. Everybody plays different characters. It sort of does the Ryan Murphy where, the same, you might play the mom. If you were the kid in 1993, you'll play the mom in 1973. And then
Yeah,
be a
that's
rent,
fun.
a villager in 1883. And I might have the years wrong, but
Yeah.
it's like 20 years apart, and then you go back to the original when they hated witches in this country. And it's not perfect by any stretch, but it's one of the ones that like it's on Netflix. It's a Netflix original trilogy, and I could see myself watching it if I have time during the Halloween months, I guess.
Yeah. Like going back to it.
Going back to it. Maybe not directly next year, but it's one I think I would revisit at some point, which I think is sort of, if I'm thinking best of, like, unless, it's very rare that a best of movie wouldn't be something you'd watch again.
Agreed. Do you think that you have objective sense of what is scary? Because I feel like you're maybe too into horror to even give
I,
me an objective read on what is scary.
I don't. All my fears are really existential about dying alone and, what is the point of living and all these sorts of things. So a mass killer just doesn't really hit me very hard. I enjoy it and I like a good jump scare as much as anybody, but yeah, like I'm not afraid of snakes or heights or anything. Like all my fears, like I said, are much more personal and those kind of fears. So, and that's
Are
life.
you? What about like ghost and like supernatural?
I like a good ghost movie, and sort of like lots of things. I want to believe in ghosts. We stayed at a haunted bed and breakfast,
Ooh.
and there were like 4 or 5 spots. We stayed in the main house, which is supposed to be the house where you hear stuff. And then we were on the tour, and it's like, if you stand over there, she might push you in the back of the leg. So I
Oh
was
my
the
god.
first one to stand there because I was like, cool. And then it's like, at the dinner table, it's like one of those big long dining tables, and they're like, stick your foot under, and the children might untie your shoes. So we talked in the dining room for 20 minutes. My foot was as far under the table as I could possibly get it, in the hopes that that would happen.
And no luck.
And no luck. I did learn something that is like, like gold chains are today and fancy cars.
Yeah.
Do you know that back in the day, the longer your drapes were, was like baller. So it was showing off your money to have drapes that like if you pulled on the floor, it was sort of
Yeah.
like, I have so much money, I don't even care. They can drag all over the floor.
That's fascinating. I did not know that. I
That and
think
then in
Supernatural is like to me the scariest. Like The Ring. The Ring is to me the scariest movie I've ever seen. So yeah, if Fear Street is more like a Halloween or something that's more like a random killer, I think I could deal with it.
yeah, it's a witch, but it's not like it doesn't
A
have
witch,
the
yeah.
like I said, it's much more. I don't know if Netflix is quite the right described a Netflix movie, but it definitely has more of a Netflixy Stranger Things sort of vibe, more so than The Ring or some sort of Japanese horror movie where they get real dark and scary.
Okay, fair enough. So those are your movies?
I mean, like I said, I didn't get to see. I have a bunch on my list that are things I really want to see that I just never, like the new Wes Anderson movie. I just didn't get to see it. I think it just came to be rented right now.
Yeah. I feel like I have not seen any movies. But I also think in my one of my other relatives thinks that this is an absolutely insane thing to say, and I think you'll agree, is that I just don't like movies as much as I like TV. And I just prefer TV as a storytelling format so much more that I don't even try to watch as many movies as I try to consume a lot of the television shows that people like.
I think I completely agree. Like I said, I love a limited series.
Yeah.
Whether it's a limited
I love
series or
limited series.
a
Yeah.
deep show, like, I mean, I want to get to know the characters. And I guess if people need to hear something that would sum up my TV/movie watching, my favorite episodes of like something that a lot of people have seen of like Game of Thrones, I like two people sitting at a table talking more so than the Battle of the Bastards. Like, I feel like I've seen a million action scenes, and it's not that they're not incredible and well done, but I like the dialogue and character drama more so than, you know, and I feel like you lose a lot of that on the big screen because you just don't have time. I mean, nobody wants
Yeah.
to be at a
Well,
3 hour
I totally
movie.
agree. I feel like we're exactly on the same page. Like I tune out a little bit for those giant battles, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm done with this. Let's move on to the like Tyrion, subtle jabs and things like that. Like that is way more interesting to me. I thought you would be more pro movie though, because you're more of like a this is the craft kind of person.
I think, I mean, TV had that bad reputation where if you were a movie star, you would never do TV. And it's
Yeah.
almost flipped. I mean, I know Ben Affleck made, I'm sure he's like, I'm never going to do an IP movie, so I'm probably never going to do a movie again. Just 'cause. And who knows? He's a
Yeah.
very dramatic person, obviously, just as an actor and a person in general. But I just sort of feel like, you could, I mean, because we can get into it right now. Like, I mean, when I think about my favorite TV shows of the year, like the first one that came to mind was Mare of Easttown on HBO. And
I agree. I think that was great, but I previewed this list with my mom, your aunt, and she said, well, everybody knows that Mare of Easttown was good. You have to think of more interesting things to put on your list. So
it's true. I mean, I'll take the shot. Maybe that's fine. But I just thought everybody on that, it was so well acted. It was just incredible.
incredibly.
Kate Winslet was amazing. The woman that plays her best friend, I always forget that actress's name, but she's just absolutely
Yeah.
insane in everything she's in. She's incredible. And
So good.
and again, I hope I don't see another season, just because I think it was perfect, and I don't, I can't imagine what she
Agreed.
would do. I mean,
And Evan Peters, I thought was incredible. He was just wildly wonderful at his role. He was the detective partner of her.
yeah. Like I said, I mean, I know it's on everybody's list, but there's a reason it's on everybody's list. I'm
Right.
sure most of the shows I have on my list are probably on everybody's list, but let's hear one of yours. You go next.
Okay, so I've divided mine into shows that I like the most and best shows.
Okay.
And I think Mare of Easttown probably would go in the best shows.
Agreed.
So
yes.
I'll start with that side, which is also Succession. Speaking of Jeremy Strong, like I think that especially the end of the season was incredibly good. This season 3 started a little slow, and I don't know if that was just because everyone's expectations were so high after having such a long COVID delay, but I do think that they pulled it out, and the acting on that show is absolutely incredible. Do you watch it?
I do. It's excellent. I mean, I no spoilers for this season, obviously, but you can't go wrong. It's a fantastic show.
Yeah, and I think what's notable to me is if I think about who deserves an Emmy, which I guess is maybe like a true TV, prestige TV lover thing to think about. Like, so many of them truly deserve an Emmy. Like, I think at least 6 of them could win Best Supporting Actor or Lead Actor, which is pretty remarkable.
Yes, which is one of the reasons awards and acting are silly.
That's true. We should give all of the awards to everybody.
Kind of. I mean, at least with
True
like
millennial style.
at least with F1, like if you win the final race or you win the most points, however, I don't actually know how it works, but I assume there's some. You've got to actually win the races to win it all. Like it's not subjective. Being like, you know what, I think he drove the best. I'm just going to give him the award.
Yes, but
Oh,
I
no.
mean, they do, the individual races you still get a trophy for, and you still get to throw champagne around. So maybe it should be like, for this episode, this person did an A+ job, and we should give them a little trophy.
Maybe just a bottle of champagne and they jump up and down and spray it everywhere, and it's like, we won.
Yeah, love it.
All right, so my next show would be on both lists because I think it was excellent, and it's also my favorite show. Might have been my favorite show of the year, and that's Only Murderers in the Building.
Agreed.
I
That's
thought it
one
was
of my
just
favorite of the year. Shows I like the most.
it was delightful. I'm not usually a Martin Short guy, but he works perfectly in this. If you told me Steve
Agreed.
Martin, Selena Gomez, and Martin Short, I probably would have been out initially.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a recipe for Jason's favorite people, I would say. I mean, not that I have anything against any of them. It's just not, but it was funny. It was a really well done mystery. As someone that listens to a lot of murder podcasts, like it was also fantastic from that standpoint. And I think
I totally agree.
And they did something that I love in mysteries. Like as a kid, I read lots of mystery books, and I was always frustrated because my dad gave me the classics, so I'd read Sherlock Holmes. And one of the things I hated about Sherlock Holmes is things would happen that Sherlock Holmes would see that I wouldn't get a chance to solve the case. And although whether you thought it was obvious or not, like you got to see all the evidence. Like they threw something out early on that if you knew what it was, that when you saw it, it would have clicked and you would have known who the murderer was as an audience member. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually surprised that they revealed the murder when they did. It was relatively early for a mystery show, but then that they kind of kept going and kept unraveling other things, I think was pretty fun. And I kind of feel the same about Martin Short. Like some stuff hits really hard for me, like him in Arrested Development and things like that.
Sure.
But other times I'm not as huge of a fan, but I'm such a huge Steve Martin fan, and I think them together is like such a wonderful duo. They have a Netflix special that I feel like is one of the things that I've laughed harder at than like anything else. So if you liked Only Murders in the Building, I feel like it's definitely worth watching their special. So I knew going in that if they're together, they're going to be delightful. And I liked the intergenerational humor that Selena Gomez brought to the show. So I found it very delightful and just a really fun watch.
And one last thing on the show that they did that I love is that you don't have to. I mean, you'll be able to go into season 2. See, everything we learned, like the mystery of season 1, is pretty much over. And we're getting another season, but we did get a hint at the end of season 1 of what the next case is going to be. But like, they're not leaving us hanging for another 9 months to figure out who the murderer was. Like, we solved season 1 mysteries. Now we got a new mystery, which I really like.
I don't even fully remember what the new mystery is, and that's fine, because I'm not really there for the mystery. I'm there for the chemistry and the jokes and the relationships between the people.
It all works. And it's on both of my list of favorite and best.
Agreed completely.
Okay,
the other 2 shows that are on my best list. One was a hard but delightful watch, which was Bo Burnham's Inside on Netflix. Did you watch that?
I did. It was excellent.
It was incredibly excellent. I feel like I left it being like, wow, that was a true artistic achievement in comedy. And then, for the next 3 months, especially on TikTok, saw all of his hilarious songs be snipped and memed and, remixed. And I just think he's incredibly brilliant and did something like truly phenomenal and noteworthy. So I think that was a really good one for the year.
It was. I have to throw out Squid Game. I really enjoyed Squid Game. Did you watch Squid Game?
I agree. Yeah, I loved it. I really loved it. It's more violent than I would usually go for, but I really enjoyed it.
I thought it was really well acted, very interesting characters. I thought, obviously in modern times where the majority of our country is living paycheck to paycheck, I thought it fit very well. My only I don't feel like we need a season 2. I don't feel like I had any unanswered questions.
Really? I feel like I have a lot of unanswered questions, and I feel like the only misstep was the finale. Like, I actually felt like the finale was kind of a mess, and
what questions do you have? Because I'm curious now.
What unanswered questions, or what do I want to see?
What unanswered questions did you have? I'll see if I can.
Okay, well, I don't fully remember, but I think that one thing that felt very out of character for the main protagonist was that he sat on the gigantic amount of money he won for, 6 months or a year, whatever the time leap was, something that was way too long, to help, like, the North Korean defector refugee's brother and to help his daughter and all of that kind of thing.
That makes I give her that, yes.
And I just don't think that the wrap-up, I guess this is a spoiler, the wrap-up of the reveal of the cop and the main villains, the fact that the main villain was his brother, I think that was pretty disappointing.
Agreed.
And we've followed the cop for so long, and he just got shot and fell off the cliff. And yes, he might not be dead, but I feel like they didn't wrap that up in a way that was satisfying to me at all.
Okay, those make sense. I know I've heard people some say they want to know who the guys in the mask were, and I'm like, you're not supposed to. I'm like, they're just rich assholes from around the world. Like, they'd have so much money that this is what they use for amusement. Like, they don't have to. I mean, they're American. They're just rich people. Like, that's who they are. Like,
Yeah.
we don't
No,
need to
I
know.
don't care about that at
Yeah.
all. They're not interesting to me at all. I think I just think that there was like very consistent and strong characters built throughout the season, and then and a lot of time invested in certain relationships that I think that the finale did not sufficiently pay off, or I don't know, just make sense of. So I am actually more eager for season 2 than I would be if it wrapped up in a perfect bow, I guess.
Okay. What's your next show from either list?
This is my last show from the last show of actual best, not things I like the most. Although I really did like this a lot, which is Hacks on HBO, the
Excellent.
comedy with Gene Smart.
Very good. She's had an incredible
Yeah.
year because she was also in Mayor of Easttown. It was fantastic.
Yeah,
And
she deserves all the flowers, and I'm very happy that she won an Emmy for Hacks.
yes, without a doubt.
And now I'm rewatching Hacks just right now with my mom, and it's a very funny show. It's well put together. There's a lot of different, B and C characters that are fun and deliver good laugh out loud jokes, and Gene Smart is just wildly good, and I think Hannah Einbinder is like really revolutionary in it and delightful, and I love it.
Okay. I think the last thing on my, well, I have two on my best of. I still have What We Do in the Shadows because I still think that show was just fantastic. And I think they went in a slightly different direction this year and they still nailed it.
I agree, and that was on my liked the most list.
And then I have one sort of floating in between because I think it definitely has its flaws, but I also thought it was excellent in a lot of ways, and that's White Lotus.
I did not finish White Lotus. I think that this was a very controversial opinion as someone that loves prestige TV, and people have yelled at me to finish it, but I just didn't like it.
I think, I mean, when I first described it to my dad, I said it's rich white people's problems in an island, which isn't exactly the best selling point, but I mean, a lot of it is that. And then you can tell that, I mean, I think the guy's an excellent writer, but it was during the pandemic and he pitched a show that he could do on a small, with very few staff, and that was White Lotus. So you could tell there were times where there would be conversations happening and you could see they were getting to something. But I'm sure if there had been a third or a fourth draft or a few more writers in the room, that maybe rather than just sort of dancing around an issue or just hinting at an issue, they could have really brought that out and showed it a little bit better. But I thought some of the stuff they did was that, I mean, some of it they did take all the way and I thought it was excellent. Like the stuff with her, I think the relationship with the friend they brought on who wasn't white and wasn't rich, but was on the vacation with the family and, but her I mean, I thought some of that was really well done, but I mean, it definitely felt like it was a sort of half-baked or three-quarters baked show. And with Brownies, I think that's excellent because I sort of like the goo, but on a TV show, you'd like to see it get a little bit more.
But to me, that feels like grading on a curve, where there was enough excellent TV that you don't need to grade on a COVID curve.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, so to me, I guess too, I think I watched it right after coming back from Hawaii, and I think it was very much like white privilege. Check yourself when you're a tourist of a native land, and I totally understand and appreciate that. But I feel like maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace, having just toured and loved Hawaii, and not wanting to see all of these horrible rich people do, horrible things to service people. That said, I love Connie Britton, and I love Jennifer Coolidge, and I love Steve Zahn, and I thought there were a lot of interesting performances. I just didn't get into it enough to finish it.
Fair enough. So that was our best of list, somewhat. And then I just have a couple of, I don't know if they're honorable mention shows or just shows that, I have two that I don't know how to exactly put them in a category. And that would be Curb Your Enthusiasm and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They're both shows that I feel like a comedy at some point, it's always going to hit its prime. And then it's no longer going to be an all-star anymore. And you can still have an all-star episode, but you're not going to have a season where it's just killer the entire way. And I think
Yeah.
both those shows have sort of hit that pace. I mean, It's Always Sunny is like, I think, the longest running sitcom now, at like 15 seasons.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's sort of like that last season of The Office. It's not good. Like, I don't need to see Jim being a dick and Pam almost having an affair with the sound guy who comes out to, punch a guy for her. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd still rather have it than not have it in a weird way.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, these are your comfort comedies.
They're comfort comedies. And obviously, in these past 2, 3, 10 years, however long it's been, those are nice to have.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, I don't know, I'm not a Curb Your Enthusiasm person. I just have never watched it. But, I mean, I think Always Funny is remarkably consistent in terms of just producing really funny episodes.
They are. I think they've reached that point that, an all time classic like The Simpsons has hit, where at some point
Yeah.
they've all done everything they can possibly do. And you can only remix it so many times before it's like, this is still really good, but I'm like, I've kind of seen this character in this situation, and not even like a similar situation, like literally in this situation. And it's just,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I mean, yeah, I still enjoy it. And also, I think Caitlin Olsen on Hacks was really good.
yeah.
And Glenn Howerton lives like one block away from me, so I always pass his house.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I have a special place in my heart for Always Sunny.
Oh, I did have one more on my best of list, and it's not just biased because it's the company my brother works with and show he works for, but Arcane on Netflix, which is an animated show. I think it's one of the highest rated shows of the year, critically. I mean, I know not everybody's into anime, but it's definitely worth a watch. And if you get past the first episode, which is a lot of genre tropes that I think you just have to get through to get to the story, it gets really, really good. So, I'm sorry, I almost forgot to
Yeah.
put that one in there.
I have not yet watched that, but I mean, I like the new frontier that it's paving in being kind of a, League of Legends fiction show. Maybe that's not as new frontier. I'm not that familiar with that space, but it does seem kind of cool that it's like a game turned into fictionalized series.
Netflix has done
And I
an
think
excellent job. Like
that's
Castlevania.
fun.
Yeah, Castlevania is another video game show they put out a couple years ago. It's going into its fourth season. It's really good.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe it's not that new of a frontier, but I still think it's interesting that it's, Riot and Netflix
Oh, yeah.
producing something for the audience.
I mean, I know when I first sort of became aware, I mean, I had some friends that were very into anime. And anime is sort of like, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. I mean, it's almost like never eating anything and then going to like a giant spice rack. Like, there'll be 3 or 4 things that are delicious, but there's just so much that you're going to be like, oh my God, why I wouldn't ever use this. And I think that, anime suffers from that, where like if you go to an anime, when there used to be stores with DVDs and Blu-rays, there's just so many. And,
Yeah.
some of them are very sexual exploitative and some of them are, borderline. I mean, it spans the genre, but if you're, like I said, when you're just dipping your toes in new, but, Arcane, Castlevania, there's some excellent ones you can jump into and they can be good for a modern audience and, just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, maybe I'll give it a shot, but I'm not much of an anime fan, but I am a Dan Sutton fan, so maybe I'll try it.
Yeah.
Okay, so my last two on the shows I like the most beyond Only Murders in the Building and What We Do in the Shadows and F1 Drive to Survive is the unscripted show Love on the Spectrum. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of it. I've never actually watched it, though.
It's on Netflix. It's beautiful. It's an Australian docu-series about people with autism that are entering relationships or trying to date for the first time. And I just think it's an incredibly beautiful and lovely and funny and heartwarming show. And you can tell that the creator of the show and the documentarian really cares about the subjects. And they have an incredible kind of side character named Jody, who is a relationship expert with and helps tutor and educate people with autism on how to get into a relationship. And it's beautiful because she's just telling you about kind of the social norms of dating and helping these people kind of overcome the hurdles of a first date. And it's very relatable and it's very funny and just an incredibly delightful watch.
Okay.
And my last one is Search Party. I would put
Search Party's
Party in
amazing. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Search Party's amazing. I didn't. Was that did the last season come out this year? I didn't remember that.
The last season is filming now, so
Oh, okay.
yeah, they took a COVID break. I think season 4 is what just was released this year.
Yeah, it's so weird. I didn't think about it. This is this year's show. It feels like it was so long ago.
Yeah, and I kind of put that in the same category. I think it's harder to make these lists when some shows are returning and some shows are new, because I think the new shiny stuff is the stuff that you want to put on the list. But I do think that Search Party is a really underrated and great show that is worth a watch.
It's an incredible show. I think I've talked about it before after season 1 or season 2 on the podcast. So yes, please do watch it.
Yeah, and I think it's a fun show too, because every season they eat through so much plot, and like they really blow up the show every single season, and change the show completely for the next season. I think that's like very ambitious and fun to watch.
Okay. And since I'm keeping you so long, we'll do 3 more just random things we really liked in 2021 of consumable content. So I'll do one, you do one, and we'll go back and forth.
Sounds good.
So I'm gonna shout out. Your husband actually loves them too, or likes them. Enjoy the band Wet Leg. They're delightful. They're from Wales. They seem to have a lot of fun. It's very much like. Initially, it reminded me a little bit of like parquet courts, and there's some stroke stuff. I mean, they've got definitely like an early 2000s like indie rock sort of sound, but they're fantastic. A lot of fun, very fun, upbeat music. It's good at the gym. And they seem to be smiling and laughing through half their songs, so I also find that very delightful.
Yeah.
So check out
their like riff, at least on Shay's Lounge is really, really fun and very catchy. I do hate how they say Shay's Lounge though. They say Shay's Long, and that really bothers me.
I know, and then the other song they say, you hop up on the bonnet and you lick the windscreen. So
They're so British.
They're very British, yes. And from Wales, so like a different level British. So yeah.
Well, they're Welsh then. So Welsh.
Yes, very Welsh. But definitely check them out.
Okay, my favorite book of the year. So I read almost exclusively romantic comedies and romance novels and chick lit. And I'm very like shameless about that. So my favorite book of the year was Dial A for Aunties. It's very delightful, I think Chinese American, set in California Valley book, and it's fun. There's a little murder, and there's some interesting Chinese American cultural observations, and a really strong cast of characters, and I just really enjoyed it, and I think it's a fun read.
Okay. I'm probably going to do an entire video game show at some point for anybody interested. With my brother, we'll do an episode. But as far as a game you can play on your phone, on your tablet, anywhere that's fantastic, is Zookeeper's World. It's a really fun sort of match 3 and match 5 sort of puzzle game. It doesn't have any microtransactions, so it's none of that BS of a lot of the other ones, but you're basically earning money to build your zoo, and then you put little animals in there and you can dress the animals up. But it's just constant changing, challenging puzzles. And, it's good if you're watching a show you've seen before, like The Office, you can play a few puzzles. So Zookeeper's World.
It's on mobile?
It's on mobile, yeah.
Okay. I might try it out. That sounds fun.
It is. It's gotten a lot of good reviews. It's getting a lot of love now. But it's a silly little, it's a touchscreen, perfect touchscreen game.
Yeah. I mean, the last game I was into was Animal Crossing, so it sounds kind of low commitment like that.
It is. And again, it's the kind of thing where there's very few timed puzzles in there. So most of them, like, you can start playing a puzzle, get distracted, and then come back and finish the puzzle, which I think it makes for a good phone, doctor's office, waiting room, whatever time you would play those games.
Yeah. Okay, what was I going to talk about? I was going to talk about a podcast. Wait. Oh, so the podcast that I have really gotten into and loved this year is Who Weekly. So it's like Who with a question mark Weekly. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
Okay, so it's very gossipy. It's very silly. The whole premise is that they really only talk about the people where when someone says their name, you would say who. So, for instance, like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are total thems, and you know who they are, you know what they've been in. They're legit movie stars, and this podcast is much more interested in the people where you're like, who are they? What are they in? You'd have to really kind of IMDb them, and they're two best friends that are just really funny, and they do this thing where they kind of rank things from who to them. So it's like, the kind of most notorious to least notorious, and dissect certain relationships in Hollywood. So it's a very funny and silly and lighthearted listen.
Okay. And then my last thing I'll shout out, just because I saw it again today. There's a group called Please Don't Destroy. They're on. Have you seen them?
Yeah, they're on SNL now.
Yeah. Their sketch, just if you Google Please Don't Destroy, just Google hard seltzer. And it's just a fantastic bit of comedy. I think it's like 2.5 minutes long, and it makes me laugh every time. So.
Yeah, they're pretty good. They are, speaking of nepotism and Nick Cage, which we, I guess, talked about before we started filming. But apparently they have a lot of interesting connections. Like one of their dads used to write for SNL, and yeah, there's like some interesting, not to say that they're not worthy of being on SNL, and they're extremely funny, but they've kind of were born into comedy, so it's interesting to see what they're up to now.
I did not know that. That's interesting, but I won't hold that against them, because like I said, if you I don't know, if you paid attention to all the hard seltzers coming out, hard seltzer sketch is very funny, and just excellent comedy timing on it as well. So that's my 3 random things. And
Love it. I think I only gave a book and a podcast, but I think that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing our podcast. We love having you on, and your support that you've given us.
It's always so fun.
And, this will be up sometime probably close to next week. We'll post this one. And everybody have a happy holiday, for whatever that means for everybody. And we'll talk to you in the new year.
Bye, Jay.